Canada's economy in the face of U.S. President Donald Trump's global trade war. It includes a $5 billion response fund for affected industries and getting rid of the 2026 electric vehicle mandate while reviewing whether or not they want to go ahead with the full mandate. It comes after a summer of trade deals and deadlines that came and went without Canada and U.S. inking an agreement. So what's that strategy behind today's policy rollout? Well, let's bring in our front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's senior advisor at Spark Advocacy and North Star Public Affairs. Melanie Paradis is the former communications director to Erin O'Toole. She's now president of Texture Communications. Former interim NDP national director Carl Belanger is here as well. He's now president of Traction Strategies. And joining me in studio, Marie Vastel. She's an editorial writer with Le Devoir. Welcome to Friday, everyone. Thanks for being with us. So, Sabrina, I guess my biggest question on this is, okay, so the government did this, and it's a big announcement. How soon do they have to show results so that people believe that what they are doing is actually good?
I mean, it was more like 17 announcements, and I think the theme of it was this is decidedly not the Trudeau government. And so I think that in and of itself is really a distinction between what we've seen in the last 18 months. And I think that this government has already demonstrated its ability to move with haste, right? The opening of the Major Projects Office, even before session has started, earlier commitments to remove trade barriers that took place this summer. This government is already moving at a breakneck speed when you consider how fast governments normally move. I think what they need to do is slow down and make sure that the narrative still matches what Canadians are asking for. So you're starting to see some of the narrative creep in about affordability, crime, immigration. And I think as session resumes, that's going to have to be important as an alignment with the government's policies. But I think when it comes to some of these things that they talked about today, whether it's the EV mandate, the new $5 billion strategic response fund, or some of the pieces on agriculture and canola and biofuels, I think that's really not for the general population. That's for industry to see results and to feel confident that they are going to be backed up if and when a continuation of the trade war happens with the United States.
Melanie, it's funny because Sabrina says they're going with breakneck speed, but I mean, I know the opposition thinks the opposite, that they actually have not done a lot since the election.
That's right. And in many respects, there hasn't been a lot of progress, and we are in an evolving issues landscape right now. So one of the hottest topics of the day is crime. Whether or not you are safe in your own home, whether you have the ability or the right to protect yourself and your family. That's at the forefront of conversations right now that are dominating politics. And I think as that heats up, and crime is one of those really difficult ones because every single day you have another story of someone else who's out on bail, who's a repeat offender, who's committed yet another crime. And, the police go and arrest this guy and he ends up back out again and repeat offending over and over again is like a revolving door. People aren't seeing progress on that. And it's become a really hot issue. And because they aren't seeing progress, it's going to be something that people continue to focus on. The government has been taking a lot of measures, and the announcement that we saw today was all about the economy. But when everyday voters, when everyday Canadians are focused on bread and butter issues and they're focused on their own personal safety, there becomes a disconnect. And so I think the risk that this government faces, and certainly it's an opportunity for the opposition, is as crime continues to dominate the news cycle, this is going to be an area where they have not shown any progress to date at all.
Yeah, Carl, Sabrina said that there were essentially 17 announcements. Did they need an 18th today on crime, to Melanie's point, because they were also in Toronto where, a lot of people are thinking about that as well? Do you think they missed an opportunity with that in trying to flood the zone with so much but not going there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it could have been lost in the noise. Obviously, this is really related to what's happening with the trade war, and I guess you could have spun it, with the fentanyl demand of the American government, but we all know those are baseless. They're not true. So I'm not sure it was necessary. But that said, where I agree with Melanie is that this is not coming fast enough. This is a little bit too late, and it's telling me that, remember, the trade war began on February 1st, 2025. The threats were before. We heard them during the campaign, but it really began on February. We're in September. And all of a sudden, we're realizing we need to do all these things to help Canadians, to help the Canadian economy. it feels like they're losing. It feels like they're panicking. They're trying to figure out what to do because what we were told is that Mark Carney was going to go there, fix things, elbows up, and we will, make sure that Canadians get their fair shake. But it's not working. It's not working. The deadlines you mentioned, Mike, have been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and we're still far away from getting anything done. So now we're shifting gears, and that's a signal to me that they have lost the capacity to deliver quickly, and they're in it for the long run, and therefore they need to have some measures. But if we implemented some of them earlier, perhaps we wouldn't be playing catch up right now.
And Marie, I know that like shifting an economy, and especially the Canadian economy away from the U.S. is like trying to turn the Titanic.
Yeah.
But at what point will Canadians go, yeah, but it needs to get done now?
The issue might be here over-promising, and I don't want to say under-delivering, but the task was huge, right,
Yeah.
from the get-go. And the Prime Minister was so confident during the election campaign, during the leadership race, that he could do this, that he was the best one to do this. He went from saying, I will not accept a bad deal, excuse me, to saying this week, well, maybe we'll take some small deals. And Minister LeBlanc saying, as long as it makes the impacts of the tariffs a little less bad.
Right.
So it looks like, actually tariffs are staying, and teeny, sectoral deals. I think the Prime Minister is probably realizing the challenge of over-promising, and it's what you're seeing in the polls, right? To Mélanie's point, people are worried about the kind of trauma of the betrayal of Donald Trump has passed, and people are now worried about, okay, well, what does it mean for me? What can you do for me? Which is more traditional political concerns. And I think that's the challenge for the Prime Minister, because it was always going to be difficult to deal with Donald Trump. It was always going to be difficult, to your point, to revise our entire trade partnerships, transform the economy like Mark Carney is saying he wants to do. Those are really big changes that he's trying to bring. It was always going to be challenging, but now you kind of have to scale it back and tell people, no, but it's normal that it's taking this long.
Yeah.
And his challenge is that it's a minority government. He doesn't have that much time. It's a fourth Liberal mandate. People are not that patient. And so that is clearly a very real risk to him. And I think they did need to make some sort of announcement today and at this point before the House comes back, because this sort of sentiment of being on a narrative of inaction is starting to creep in on them.
Sabrina, I got about a minute left. So how much of this was Mark Carney overplaying his hand during the election and basically saying, I'm the only guy who can do this. Look, I've managed economies. I know what I'm doing here. Don't worry about it. I'm going to fix it all. And then he sort of gets in there and realizes it's a lot messier than people expect from the outside.
I don't think he has overplayed his hand. I mean, let's look back to one indicator of success for this government, and that's the relationship between the Prime Minister's office and the premiers. And you have not seen that productive of a relationship between those two offices in many, many years. And I think when you have premiers on side with your economic agenda, that's how things get done. And so I don't think that he's overplayed his hand. I think that he's on track to deliver what he needs to deliver. I think what is going to be important is that domestic angle in the budget that we see in October, November.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with the premiers all being on side.
For now.
But that also doesn't help the economy with the U.S., doesn't turn you away from the U.S., and it doesn't, so, a lot of things it doesn't do. But we're going to possibly talk about that.
6,000 jobs
Right.
in August, right?
Yeah, it doesn't help with your job losses. There's a lot that it doesn't help.